This is the Sons of Montezuma podcast. It's episode number 69. The Aztecs versus Arizona in the 2022 Snapdragon Paige Spiranic Global Warming Bowl presented by AleSmith. And stepping into Monty's den today to give us all the facts about Arizona from WildcatAuthority.com, it's Jason Scheer.
San Diego State University.
Jason, holler if you hear me.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Jason, how you doing, man?
Good.
So, joining us today, representing the U of A, we are joined by Jason Scheer. He is the senior editor and publisher of WildcatAuthority.com. Jason, welcome to the Sons of Montezuma podcast, man. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
It's been a pretty busy last month or so for you, huh?
Yeah, it's been. I'm ready for football, man.
Yeah, I know we all are, and it's weird. The thing about like conference realignment is that it affects every school.
Yeah.
Right. Like the stuff that's happening to the Pac-12, in some ways, for San Diego State, could be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
For Arizona, it hits them different. And then, you know, there's schools that want to get in the Mountain West. So if San Diego State leaves, it's crazy the impact of two schools leaving that really San Diego State doesn't have much in common with, you know?
Yeah.
And the impact that it could have on both Arizona and San Diego State.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, like San Diego State's the only school that can like make a case for the Pac-12. Like the other ones that I hear, it's like Fresno, UNLV. It's like, no, just I'm good.
You know, and I actually had tweeted at you as like, yeah, we don't want those guys either.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. we want to leave on the road and get away too. So with that being said, so the one thing, like I have a 247 membership. We have SDSU doesn't have a publisher, but allows me to read your message boards, and I'm on yours quite a bit.
Yeah. And
I'm on the rest of the Pac-12 a ton. Where do you think, like when I read the different message boards, it's obviously Arizona is the one that wants to go to the Big 12 the most from the fan base, and that's where do you think that comes from as far as being particular to Arizona?
I think that like it started years ago. So when Sean Miller was the coach of the basketball team, there was literally like a bounty on his head placed by referees where they basically said, if you tee this guy up and eject him, like you'll get paid. And so like since then it's been like, you know, screw the Pac-12. And then, you know, at the end of the day, like football's great. Everybody knows that's where the money is. But in this town, it's a basketball town. And so when you look at Arizona and like the Big 12 with Kansas, Baylor, you know, Houston, Texas Tech, all those schools, the fans want that because they're tired of, you know, playing the Pac-12 basketball, which isn't good and is going to be flat out bad without USC and UCLA. And so, I mean, with that, they just want in now and at least have good basketball matchups.
No, I mean, it's hard to argue that from that point of view. So like visiting on the board, it's almost somewhat hostile towards the Pac-12, and you know there'll be a couple. I see a couple of the forum members like not stand up, but you know they want to stay in the Pac-12. So, have you heard anything more recent? What's the last stuff you've heard?
I think it's going to slow down quite a bit now with the season start because it's hard to announce something and really get it going during the season. Because there's so much going on. Then you worry about it being a distraction. My guess is like we don't hear anything until like the new year. Like I think it's going to slow down quite a bit. You'll hear rumors occasionally, but I think it's going to kind of shut down a little bit. And at the end of the day, it's all about Washington and Oregon and what they do. If they somehow sign and stay in the Pac-12 or whatever you want to call it, it'll stay together for like 5 more years until we do this whole thing all over again.
Yeah, I would have. But don't you expect the Pac-12's TV deal to be before the new year?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because like that it comes down to Washington and Oregon, because if they're not going to sign a deal, like if they're still wondering if they're going to get in the Big Ten, they're not signing anything. Like it's basically the deal's going to happen as soon as those two schools decide it's going to happen. And then like the money, like they got to decide, like, you know, if they're signed for a certain amount, what's going to happen if they do expand? Is that money going to, you know, become lower? And then all of a sudden you're worrying about signing, and just to have that money total become lower in a couple months, whatever. So, I mean, it's a long negotiation process. It would surprise me if it came in like the next few weeks or whatever. But if the Big Ten tells Oregon, like, no, we're not adding you this round, then I guess it could move, you know, pretty quickly.
Yeah, that was kind of my question, because the rumors I've heard is everybody's talking about kind of like October is like kind of the end of we should hear something about their TV deal by then. And like the Big Ten should be closing the door on Notre Dame for now by then. And I think that's kind of what everything hinges on, is Notre Dame, as far as I know. The rumors I've heard, nobody really knows, I guess. But it seems like around October is when we can kind of expect maybe things to start leaking out, or I don't know if you've heard that as well, or.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's Notre Dame is still the main piece. Like if they give and they might have already given an answer. Like you said, nobody really knows. But I mean, if they decide to join the Big Ten, which at this point would surprise me, it would be a situation where, okay, now you probably got to add a couple more schools. If they don't join the Big Ten, now the Big Ten can be patient. Like they can, you know, maybe they're going to wait a little bit longer and look east instead of west, or whatever it may be. But you know, the longer it goes, I think the worse it is for the Pac-12, because it's obvious that, you know, you hear all these reports of like, oh, things are looking great and all that. But if they were looking so great, there'd be a deal by now. And, you know, there hasn't been, and there's nothing imminent. And so the longer it goes, I think the worse it looks, and the more impatient that the schools involved get.
So us here, we're new to like the Pac-12 media. So like Wilner's new to us, kind of, you know. And the one I want to ask you about is the beef that you have with John Canizaro. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, John Canzana.
John Canzana. Have you always kind of had like a, you know, just a little
thing? Like I like Wilner. Like Wilner used to cover the U of A. He started in Tucson covering. He was on the Arizona beat, and so Arizona fans kind of don't like him because he left Arizona, and it's been kind of harsh on him since he left. I think he's fine. Like he doesn't bother me that much. With Canzano, what happened was like he was reporting something that I know, like with ADs that he was talking to, that I know for a fact is just made up. Like I know exactly what ADs. Like I know he's not talking to Arizona or ASU. Like I'm 100% sure on that. And so like you can narrow it down what ADs he's talking to, and it's like, okay, talking to the Oregon State AD isn't really helping anybody, because obviously they're going to say the Pac-12 is awesome. We're here forever, because if not, they're going to the Mountain West. And it's like, I called him out on it, and then he got super personal, and then we kind of it went from there, and it's been downhill ever since. But Winter, I don't mind. I think Canzano kind of is pushing a narrative like the Pac-12 is great, and I think he's kind of just printing whatever he hears. And the ADs right now, I mean, even to me, they're not going to be completely truthful. They're going to paint it as the best case scenario until it's not. And USC and UCLA would have done the same thing. Like if you asked them the day before they left to the Big Ten how everything's going, they would have said it's great. And then 20 minutes later, not that they're going to the Big Ten. That's just, you know, because of how all this works.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know you're a 24/7 guy, so you kind of focus a lot on recruiting. Now, the move to the Big 12, how do you think it'll affect, let's the hypothetical move to the Big 12, excuse me. How do you think that would affect Arizona's roster building? Because it seems like Arizona and Arizona State, they recruit highly in California. And I know about 15 years ago or so, I think it was Makovich when he was at what was it, ASU or you? I get the.
You don't talk about him anymore.
Yeah. I remember back then he tried to go and focus more on Texas versus California, and it was a disaster. So I know everybody says, oh, we'll just replace California with Texas, but it's been done before and it wasn't very successful. Like, how do you think that would affect California recruiting and things of that nature?
Yeah, like it's not a coincidence. Like Makovic went to Texas and was awful. Mike Stoops was hired, went mostly into California, a little bit into Texas, did well. Sumlin was Texas, fired. Jedd Fisch now, it's pretty much all California and around the area. Like, you have to be able to recruit California. And I think it does become a little bit more difficult when you go in the Big 12, because the pitch you have right now against the LA schools is, look, you're going across the country to go face Rutgers. And meanwhile, if you're in the Pac-12 with Arizona, like, your furthest trip is Washington or whatever it may be. And Jedd Fisch even said that on media day. He said, we're absolutely using that as a recruiting tool. And I think, you know, if Arizona went to the Big 12, they would have no choice but to recruit Texas. Like, you kind of have to, because, you know, that's where you're playing a good chunk of your games. But it would become a little bit harder, I think, to sell those California kids. And it would be interesting, especially for Fisch, because he's recruiting California. I mean, that is absolutely his base, with Arizona, California, and maybe he'll go to Hawaii and a couple other places, as opposed to like Sumlin, who tried to get all Texas. And so things do definitely become a little bit more difficult there.
So how's recruiting been going with Fisch?
I mean, it's kind of wild. Like, Arizona was 1-11 last year, and he landed a top 25 class.
Wow.
Like, and he basically has said, like, if you don't recruit and you're not on my staff. And when he hired Johnny Nansen as defensive coordinator, he said one of the major reasons why is because he recruits. And I don't think there's been a staff that recruits to the level that Fisch does, at least in Arizona, for a long time, because every coaching staff, like in the past, they've had guys that just didn't recruit, and every single coach on the staff recruits. And at the end of the day, I mean, you have to. It's the only way you're winning here is if you recruit well. And I don't expect them to land, you know, top 25 classes every year, but like on Saturday, you'll see they're going to play like 10 true freshmen. And it's not only because they were so bad last year, it's because, I mean, these kids are pretty good players.
Matt, you ready to get into some football now?
I'm staying in my lane. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all the expansion talk, I'm like above my head, man. 'Cause who knows?
Someone who is on a lot of message boards, I can't. I mean, Jason's probably the more active of the publishers that you'll see on there. And look, you could buy one for San Diego State, and it allows you to go to these different boards. So there's a lot of value in it, even though that we don't have a publisher. And especially during realignment time, it's good to be able to hop to the different message boards.
Yeah, it's a cool thing with 24/7. When you buy the VIP subscription, you can go to any message board on the entire network. You can spend a lot of time reading, especially it's fun on a Saturday after like teams lose. You can go to their message boards. It's awesome.
It's oh my God, you're like me. I do that same exact thing.
Yeah. What do they call it? Schadenfreude? I love doing that, man. After you win and you go, okay, let's see what the how the opposing fans feel after that.
Well, let's be real, Jason. 1-11 last year in football. There were a lot of guys checking out your guys' board last year, trying to see the reactions from the Wildcat fans. Obviously, the Aztecs went in there, and it wasn't pretty for you guys. But this year is a very different year, as we've heard. 52 new players on that Wildcat team. Is this mainly from the new recruiting class, right? Or how many transfers are we looking at?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of transfers. It's recruiting. It's walk-ons. There was the best word to use is purge. I mean, they basically said, if you're not very good, you probably need to find another place to play. And, and a lot of these kids were fine with it because they were basically going from playing every down to, a lot of these kids weren't going to play at all. And so they left, and I was watching football the other night, and one of them is a wide receiver at Idaho State now, and he was starting at Arizona. And so that's the level of no disrespect to Idaho State, but that's kind of the level of football we were talking about at Arizona last year. So a lot of transfers, 15, I think, and then just a full recruiting class.
So tell us about this quarterback, Jayden de Laura. He's transferred over from Washington State. That had to be a tough move to see for the Cougars to see him go to a in-conference rival, man. Yeah,
so last year, Arizona had one of the worst QB situations I've ever seen. I think they played 5 quarterbacks. They finally found one late in the season in Jordan McLeod. And just to show you how bad it was, people wanted him to start the game after he threw 5 picks against Oregon because they were in it going into the fourth quarter. And then the next game, he breaks his leg. So they're back to square one. So the quarterback situation was just awful. And they go, and Washington State was recruiting Cameron Ward, who's a really good transfer quarterback. And Jaden DeLore basically said, screw this, entered the portal, knew a couple guys on Arizona. It was on Arizona within like 48 hours. And Judd Fish said, you're going to start. You're the man. Like, we're not doing a quarterback competition. And he's come in, and I mean, he is such an upgrade. And you know, there's questions like Washington State, you run the spread and all that. And so there's questions about how he's going to adjust, but it is night and day from the quarterback situation last season.
I followed his recruitment, and he was a coup for Washington State. That was a really good pickup. I mean, when he was in the market, even I had for San Diego State, man, I'd love to have that kid. That kid's really good. He's a really good quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, he's legitimately like, and I know, like, to me, you know, you're comparing him to last year. There's a lot of guys that will look great when you do that, but the kid 2 years ago was the offensive freshman of the year in the Pac-12. I mean, he has the numbers to back up, and he's seen this level of competition, and so there's not a worry. Like, it's almost like this time last year, Arizona didn't know who their quarterback was. They just knew that they would play 2 guys and kind of go from there. And Arizona's known who their quarterback was from the day that DeLore stepped on campus. And, you know, I'm not saying he didn't earn it, but like he's that good. And you know, he's going to be a major step up. And I would be surprised if the offense isn't better, you know, just because of him.
What do you see as being like the top facet of his game, the top attribute of his game?
I think the one thing that really stood out was he makes his reads and his progressions, and he does a really nice job, but he also won't hang in the pocket for so long. Like, he's creative with his playmaking. He'll leave the pocket, and not necessarily to run. Like, he can throw on the move. And there were a couple plays during camp where he would get in trouble and throw a shovel pass, and he gained 5 yards, and it's still better than, you know, taking the sack. But he never seemed rattled, and that's the thing that, you know, is his maturity at the position is better than any guy that Arizona had, and really his ability to make plays. And Arizona tried to kind of keep him in the pocket in camp, and then in the scrimmage, I said, you know what, you can run a little bit, and he broke off like a 30-yard run and made a couple other plays. And his mobility, I think, is kind of underrated. He's not a guy that's going to take off and run for 100 yards. He's not like a Burmeister type, for instance, but he can get out there and he can move around and avoid hits and make plays.
Okay. Well, I'm a big offensive line guy, and I know it was a sore subject last year for the Wildcats. I know we went to that game as a group in Tucson, and they struggled mightily trying to contain the San Diego State defense. I know they lost one of their better guys, Donovan Lai. I'm sure I butchered his name, Lai. And I know they have a couple transfers that are expected to start this year. How does the offensive line look so far in camp, as far as being able to open some lanes for the running game and protecting Jaden?
Yeah, like when I talked to the coaches last year, I would basically say, like, what are you doing with the offensive line? Like, it's bad. And what was weird was they said, yeah, like they knew the offensive line wasn't good, but a lot of it they blamed on the quarterback, like hanging on to the ball too long or making the wrong reads and things like that. And, you know, it's tough to judge until you get in a game, but it looked better during camp. It's still probably the weakness of the offense. That most of the guys that were on the offensive line are returning from last year, so there's experience. They added Jonas Avignaire, a 4-star offensive lineman from Hawaii, freshman. He's starting right away. I mean, he is a future NFL player. You know, I thought he'd be good. He did good at the Polynesian Bowl and all these all-star games and all that, but he arrived in the spring and he was pretty much starting by the end of the first week of camp. Josh Baker, center, and really the other guys are returning. The biggest question is depth. I mean, it's like they have one lineman who has to play guard and tackle because they don't have that depth. And so if a guy goes down, there's a major drop off from the starting unit to the guys behind them. And part of that was like they went and got a guy named Davis Duvall from Baylor, and he was supposed to play, and he quits the team in camp. Then they get another guy who was walked on and just didn't really, turn into anything. And so, they added guys, and the goal is that those guys will be ready, but they're probably not. And so they're about 7 deep, maybe 8 deep on the offensive line, but there's still a major drop off from that starting unit. So if a guy goes down, the whole line's pretty much going to suffer. They're going to have to shuffle some things in order to make it work.
And then, so skill position wise, how's Arizona looking this year?
Yeah, so quarterback wasn't the only position that they kind of purged. They went out, Jedfish went out and changed the whole wide receiver room. The first guy, Tatoria McMillan, if I could pronounce his name, I just call him T-Mac. 4-star wide receiver. They got him from Oregon. He had offers. They got him over Oregon. He had offers from everyone. I mean, he is as good as it gets. And he is a guy that, to be honest, shouldn't have gone to Arizona in the past. Like, he wasn't, Arizona wouldn't even have been in the conversation for him. Then they go out and they get UTEP transfer Jacob Cowing, who is also really good. He caught, I think, 1,300 yards last season. In a legitimate, like, they got him over like Florida. And some of the times you got to get lucky with these kids. Like, T-Mac's quarterback in high school was Noah Fafita, who also went to Arizona. Jacob Cowing is from Phoenix, and he just had a kid. So he committed to Arizona because he wanted to be closer to family. Then they go and they add Kevin Green, who decommitted from USC, and 4-star wide receiver. So they have like multiple 4-star guys in the wide receiver room. And that's something that, last year they had a guy, Stanley Berryhill, who scored a touchdown against San Diego State. Now he's with the Falcons. But that was really the only guy that they had that was consistent wide receiver last season. And part of that was probably the passing game. And so the wide receiver is highly upgraded, but also super young. I mean, Kevin Green's a freshman. They're going to play a guy named AJ Jones, freshman, T-Mac, freshman. Like, Cowing's the veteran of the group, and he's only played 2 years of college ball. So there's a lot of talent, but we don't know what that talent necessarily is going to look like in a game. Running back situation, they have Michael Wiley, who was on the team last year. They have a freshman from Fresno named Jonah Coleman, he's huge. Like, he's a bowling ball. He's really good. And then they added DJ Williams as a transfer from Florida State. He was at Auburn and he ran for like 600 yards as a freshman in the SEC. And he was like really good as a freshman. And then he got hurt. He went to Florida State to follow his offensive coordinator. Then his offensive coordinator went to Oregon. And so he transferred from Florida State to Arizona, and he's on the depth chart. And then there's a guy named Rayshawn Speedy Luke. He was the MVP of the Army All-American Bowl, super fast, small. Like, he's, 5'9", 160. And so you worry that he's going to break in half. But, he is like legit one of the fastest guys I've seen on the field. And he had to play in the scrimmage where he took a small pass and made a cut, and he's gone. And if he gets to that second level, he's gone. So that's another, they've added the offensive side of the ball. Beyond the offensive line, they've rebuilt every single position. It is completely different from last season.
So with that much turnover and change, how have they looked in camp so far? There's had to be some growing pains, right?
Yeah, they didn't look good at first. They looked like an offense that hadn't played together before. Jaden DeLora had a practice about midway through camp where he threw 3 picks and looked awful. And they had a walkthrough after. And I don't know what, and Jedfish said the walkthrough was just them pointing out little things, and DeLora said the same thing. And I don't think he threw a pick after that walkthrough. Like, I think he went 4 or 5 practices where he just looked phenomenal and the whole offense just clicked. But yeah, it was ugly. Like, T-Mac is a guy where he dominated SoCal. Like, he was one of the best players in the country. He comes to practice, and like, we interviewed him the other day, and he's like, nobody knows this, but the first 5 practices, he didn't get a catch. They put the best corner on the team on him, and he didn't know what to do with him at first. And he grew and he became, better as camp went on, but there's definitely some growing pains to get to where they're at now.
Awesome. And has he, I know Fish runs somewhat of a pro style offense, but it's more of like a modern pro style where not everything is exclusively under center. Is he doing a lot of stuff under center, or is he pretty much in the shotgun most of the time? How has the mixture been?
It's probably a mix, but they're going a little bit more under shotgun this season.
Okay.
They've done, and I think part of that is, that's, and Fish had his weekly presser today and said it a few times that they decided to sit down, figure out what everyone's good at on offense, and basically change things to fit that. And they went more under center last season. It didn't work. Jaden Delores used to pretty much all shotgun, so they're going to run more out of shotgun. And so I think the offense is going to look different. I don't think it's going to be like a run and shoot type of deal, but I think the offense will look different than it did last season. Not dramatically, but there's going to be some small changes.
It sounds like if there was a time to play Arizona, it's playing them in the first game.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Because I think the offense is going to be clicking. Like I think the offense is going to surprise people. The defense I'm a little iffy on. I think the offense is going to surprise people, but first game of the season, hostile environment, freshmen all over the place on offense. I mean, I would absolutely say with San Diego State's defense that they're catching Arizona's offense at a good time.
And you mentioned the defense. I know it was a similar deal on defense where they had a bunch of transfers come in and they kind of revamped the way the personnel. I know tackling was an issue last year. You could tell right away when San Diego State played against Arizona, the tackling was a problem. And I watched a few Arizona games the rest of the year, and it got a little better as the season went on, but you could tell it was still an issue. Is that still something that's popping up, or did all those transfers they brought in kind of you're not going to fix something that quickly, but kind of move it towards the proper way or the proper performance from the defense?
So I think a lot of it last year was also scheme. Like Don Brown was their defensive coordinator last season, and he only played man. Didn't care. He basically said he didn't cater the defense to other teams. It was, we are playing man, and if we get killed in man, so be it. And Arizona was small. Like they just couldn't, like San Diego State, when you watch that game last year, like you look at a guy like Bellinger, for instance, he was bigger than like Arizona's entire defense. And he gets that first pass in the open field, and there wasn't a dude that was getting anywhere near him and bringing him down.
Jordan Brookshire fakes the handoff, slipping out the tight end. First down and more. Jay Rudolph down the sideline. Rather, Daniel Bellinger for San Diego State. Bellinger inside the 20 and Russell out of bounds.
And so they had to go out and get bigger. And this year they're playing a lot more zone. And so they're going to have more help tackling. I think it's better. Again, it's hard to judge during camp, but I think the scheme at least is going to go a long way into at least making this defense look better. The personnel probably isn't there yet on defense like it is on offense. A lot of those transfers that you mentioned haven't necessarily worked out. Like they're not starting for the most part. And so the defense is still kind of a question with depth and personnel, but I think scheme will go a long way in making it look better.
And you mentioned his name, the new defensive coordinator. What was his name again? I'm sorry.
Johnny Nansen. So he was at USC and UCLA, knows the Pac-12 well. But I mean, that's another thing. Like this is literally the first game he's ever been a defensive coordinator.
And he's a 4-2-5 guy. I think that's what I have on my sheet here.
Yeah, and they're gonna play a bunch of different formations. You're gonna see a lot of dime. They have some funky formations they did in practice, and it's Don Brown we're playing man. That's what we're doing. No matter what, we'll blitz you, but it's man. And Nansen's not that way. They're gonna play a lot of different looks.
Okay.
People were excited for Brown coming in last year, right?
He's Dr. Blitz. He's a great interview. Like he's a super cool dude. I think what happened was basically, and he's the coach of UMass now. And so I think no one really thought that would happen. They thought he'd be here a few years and bring in his own guys, but his scheme just didn't work with the personnel that Arizona had. I mean, he put the cornerbacks on an island with like no safety help, and they just weren't good enough to do that. And the safeties in the secondary really struggled. And, they only forced 4 turnovers, like 4 interceptions the entire year because they're playing man. And it wasn't that type of defense. Whereas Nansen, I mean, the goal is to absolutely go force turnovers. And Don Brown wasn't a big turnover guy. As long as he forced you to punt, he was okay with it. And it just didn't really work with Arizona's personnel.
Right.
Okay, so with Arizona's personnel this year on the defense, if there's one guy to keep our Aztecs fans to keep our eye on that defense, who would it be?
So Keon Bars on the defensive line. He's an all Pac-12 type of guy. He battled injury a little bit. They kept him kind of fresh during camp to make sure that he's able to play and be 100% and play as much as possible because he's that important. Defensive tackle, really good player. In my opinion, probably the best player on the defense with Christian Roland Wallace at corner. Those are the two guys that I would definitely keep an eye on if I was a Aztec fan.
Okay, Jason, tell us, why will the Aztecs win this game?
I think, we kind of touched on it. Like, the first game, you're starting freshmen at, almost every wide receiver position. You're starting a quarterback, and I know he has experience, but it's still his first game, as a quarterback for Arizona in this environment. But the biggest thing with me is just the overall depth on defense. Like, one of Arizona's starting cornerbacks is questionable. If he doesn't play, there's a chance that you're throwing a freshman corner right into the mix. And even if he doesn't start, he's going to play a lot. Linebacker isn't very deep, even though there's only two of them. Defensive line, Arizona announced today a guy, again, not deep, but J.B. Brown, 6th-year senior, out for the season with a shoulder surgery. And so it's the defense I don't think is there yet. I'm not sure if they can match. The biggest worry is, can they match the physicality? Because like you mentioned last year, it was very clear who the more physical, bigger, and stronger team is. And that's hard to fix in 1 year.
Okay, so let me ask you the inverse question. Jason, why will the Wildcats win this game?
It would be the offense. It would be the fact that the offense is significantly improved. I think when you look at San Diego State, obviously the defense, is going to be their staple, the run game, but I think they have similar questions to Arizona. Like, they lost their running back. They lost Cameron Thomas. They've lost guys that, how will the guys that are replacing those step up? And Arizona has similar questions. The difference is Arizona was bad, and so those guys leaving isn't really that big of a deal. And so, to me, it's offense. I don't see Arizona winning like a low-scoring game. I think the best way for Arizona to win is basically to get into somewhat of a track meet. If it's like a 17-13 type of game, I just don't see how Arizona wins that type of game.
All right, Aztecs fans, you guys hear that? Are you nervous yet?
What's your season prediction for Arizona? Like, what are you thinking? What's a good year? What are they expecting there?
I think the best case scenario is probably 5 wins. Like, the out of conference schedule is just wild because it opens up at San Diego State. Then they come back here and they play Mississippi State. Then they play North Dakota State, which was by far the best team in FCS. Then they're on the road at Cal. And they have a 4-game stretch that's like Oregon, Washington, Utah, USC, and UCLA.
Oh, man.
It's like whoever made their out of conference schedule, it's just brutal. And so that's the biggest obstacle. It's so hard. Usually when you want to turn a program around, like, you schedule cut pace. Like, UCLA's schedule is the worst schedule you've ever seen this year. It's insanely bad. And Arizona would love that schedule, but it's tough. I mean, I know some people around here are thinking that Arizona can make a bowl. Honestly, I think if Arizona wins like 4 games with that schedule, people should be happy based on what we saw last year.
I know that you were not happy about the North Dakota State.
It
Why
is.
did you schedule that game?
It's such a stupid game.
There's no benefit for it at all.
Yeah, like, if Arizona wins, they're supposed to win. And if Arizona loses, they lost to an FCS team. But meanwhile, it's an FCS team that wins the national championship every year and has beaten, like, I think it's its last 6 D1 opponents. And it's like they're good. They have guys that go to the NFL. They've got like 2 or 3 guys that are going to get drafted. And it makes no sense to schedule that game.
That system, man, is so fun to watch. I love watching their offense. It's so like old school physical, but with new school principles, man. It's great.
They're really well coached. Yeah, and they're fun to watch. They're super well coached. They don't make mistakes. It's a tough matchup.
If only they brought more in terms of market and fan base. I'd love to have them in the Mountain West, but
yeah. I mean, and they're good enough to do it. It's just like you said. There's just no appeal, no market for them.
Yeah.
Care to give us any score prediction for this Aztecs and Wildcats game, or are you not in the prediction game?
I've been going back and forth. I think in a way that Arizona, and it sounds so stupid because Arizona was 1-11 last year. I think Arizona is being a little underestimated because of how bad they were last year. I think that San Diego State, you got to keep in mind, like, they don't know what defense Arizona's running. They don't know what offense Arizona's running because they've changed all of it. The personnel is just completely different. It's a completely different team. So I'm starting the season with an upset pick. It's probably not realistic because, I will say this. I would be really surprised if it looked like it did last year. San Diego State blowing out Arizona would legitimately surprise me. I think it's going to be a much closer football game. San Diego State's probably the better team right now, the more physical team. But I think that if you're not familiar with Arizona and the changes that they've undergone, I think you're going to be a little bit surprised overall.
So Jason, you're coming out, right?
Yeah, I'll be there. We're coming out on Friday. I'm pumped to see the new stadium, and I got family in San Diego, so I'm excited.
Oh, cool.
You have to come stop by the tailgate, man, and say hi.
Yeah, definitely. I will. For sure.
We're letting everybody know we'll be in the yellow parking lot, the south lot. You can't miss the big Sons of Monty logo flag. So if you find us, man, definitely connect. We'd love to have you stop by, man. It's great having you on the show. Going over the enemy territory and sharing some secrets on your team. I appreciate your time, man. Thank you. We'll have to have you. Man, if things work out and we're in the Pac-12, I wouldn't mind this every year, man. I really wouldn't mind that road trip, having you guys over and we going over to Tucson to, basketball, football, all that.
I'm not complaining about going to San Diego. So yeah, we're good. And like you said, like basketball, like that was a rivalry for a while.
Yeah, I know. I miss playing Arizona.
Yeah, me too. And they just basically said, we're done for a while. We played so many times, but yeah, like those games were fun. So it would be fun. Like I said before, like I honestly, I'm not just saying this. I think San Diego State's probably the only Mountain West team that would work and do well in the Pac-12.
Awesome.
We're hoping we could use some good news.
Good news, yeah, with everything going on right now.
All right, Jason, we won't hold you up any longer, man. Thanks again for joining the Sons of Montezuma podcast. Jason Scheer, or what is it, the Wildcat Authority. So make sure you check that out to get all your info on the Wildcats when you're doing your recon.
He's good on Twitter too.
Yes. At Jason Scheer on Twitter.
Awesome.
All right, man. You have a great night.
You too. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Easy, man.
All right, guys, just a few days left to the big game. Once again, the Sons of Montezuma tailgate will be taking place in the South Yellow parking lot at 8 a.m. We're going to be live streaming the event, so those of you who can make it, cruise by. We're going to have some live interviews, some highlight videos, of course, and some cool views of the stadium. So for those of you who can't be there at the game and want to watch from your computer or your phone at home, you could follow us on Twitter at Sons of Monty, or definitely subscribe to our Sons of Montezuma YouTube channel. Once again, check back tomorrow where we're going to post our exclusive interview with Aztecs wide receiver, the senior captain, number 45, Jesse Matthews, also featuring Alex Johnson, his trainer from Alex Johnson Sports and Fitness. And right now, you can still order your Sons of Monty gear at our online shop. Use the discount code MONTY at checkout for a special discount. Until then, sonsofmontezuma.com. Go Aztecs.